All right, thank you for joining us today. What we're doing through the Aesthetics Council is an Estheticians Guide to COVID-19. I'd like to introduce our guest today. It is Leslie Roste. She is a microbiologist and a registered nurse, as well as Director of Education for Barbecide. So let's go ahead and get started into some of the questions that you're dealing with, Leslie. One of the things that I would like to really clarify for all estheticians out there is virus transmission, because I think that's one of the things that people often don't understand. Can you fully explain that?
Sure. So the most common route for almost any virus, let me back up and be clear that we don't know exactly how this is transmitted, or we don't know the limitations of how it's transmitted. Let's say that. We do know that this virus can live on surfaces, plastics, metals like stainless steel, for up to 4 days. So that is a lengthy period of time. If you were to touch that surface and then touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, anywhere on your face, you could be exposing yourself to it. On soft surfaces, your tables, linens, that kind of thing, we know it's a much shorter period of time, maybe up to a day. They're not exactly clear on how long it will live on that surface, so not as dangerous as the hard, non-porous surfaces. Luckily, those are the surfaces you can disinfect. Respiratory droplet, we now know that it can live airborne for about 3 hours before it actually hits the ground, so it can stay suspended. That will be more common in more humid environments than it will be in more dry environments, but still airborne transmission from person to person, we do know can happen, which is why we have our social distancing that we're now doing to try and eliminate that risk, or to at least mitigate it. Interestingly enough, there was also a research study that just came out in an emerging infectious disease article that I get. They did a quick review of some patients who recovered in Wuhan, China. And in at least half of them, they were still shedding the virus, live virus, in their stool 4 days after they had symptoms, after their symptoms had ceased. So there is some possibility that someone would continue to shed it in their stool for some period of time. Obviously, that's one of the areas where we're most acutely aware of being clean about. So it's not as big of a concern as respiratory droplet and surface contamination.
Okay, sounds scary, but let's talk about disinfection efficacy. I know we're all basically doing the steps that we should do in our
Yeah.
treatment rooms, at least you should be. How do you know that you're using the right disinfectant, or what are you looking for? Because as we know, COVID-19 has not really been tested yet by the EPA,
Correct.
right?
That is correct. So to get something on our label for any disinfecting company, you have to get a sample. And right now there are no samples that we can get to even test. So what you're looking for is a product that may have efficacy for human coronavirus. Coronavirus, as you know, is the name of a huge family of viruses. So human coronavirus would be what has the only test that's available to be tested for at this point. Couple things about that though. Lots of companies may have tested for human coronavirus, but it may not be on their label. So you may want to go to a website. As products become scarcer and more difficult to find, you may want to go to somebody's website and ask specifically, are you effective against human coronavirus, if you don't see it on the label. And the reason I say that is there's two types of viruses. There's enveloped viruses and non-enveloped viruses. Enveloped viruses are viruses where the cell has a lipid membrane around it. If we can disrupt that lipid membrane, that inactivates or destroys the cell, and making it really easy to kill on a surface. So other enveloped viruses would be things like HIV, hepatitis. So most of the disinfectants you're already using, if they're labeled for HIV and hepatitis, are highly likely to also kill this virus. But if it doesn't say it on the label, contact your manufacturer, go on their website, because oftentimes we are effective against things that we don't put on the label just because we would fill up the whole label with all the things that we might have tested for. And quite frankly, until 2 months ago or a month ago, human coronavirus to all of us was just a common cold. I mean, that's really what we thought of it as. So a lot of people
Okay.
might not have put it on their labels.
What about using alcohol? I see a lot of people trying to use like 99% alcohol too.
That's a good question. So alcohol is an interesting item. You wouldn't want to use it for surface disinfection because both isopropyl and ethyl, well, isopropyl is what I would probably be using, but isopropyl alcohol has a 20 to 30-minute contact time. And obviously you can't, it doesn't stick around for 20 to 30 minutes, it evaporates. And so it is also, as we all know, highly flammable, which also creates another problem. But if you decide to use alcohol, like I've also seen people trying to make their own hand sanitizer. And some of the videos I've seen, they'll say, I'm using 99% alcohol. The problem is that for alcohol to work, it needs water as a catalyst. So 70% alcohol is actually the gold standard. You want an alcohol that has a percentage of water in it to make it be able to be the most effective. 99% alcohol is actually less effective in this scenario than 70% alcohol. If you're using it, try to stick with the 70%. It's why hand sanitizers are either 60 to 70% right around there, because that really is the best efficacy.
How do you feel about people making their own hand sanitizer? Do you think it has any efficacy at all?
Well, here's my whole feeling about hand sanitizer in general, particularly in this industry. It might be different if I'm talking about your home, but look, every rule of every state, for the most part, says wash your hands. There are a few states that allow hand sanitizer. But beyond that, when we talk about COVID-19 in particular, every single press conference you've heard, the CDC, the World Health Organization, probably your local governments, nobody says hand sanitizer. Everyone says wash your hands. So what we do know is that hand washing is effective, particularly when it's paired with not touching your face, being conscious about not touching your face, which I know is ironic because that's your job to touch other people's faces.
Right.
So I get the irony there. But you know, hand washing should really be the standard, particularly because you're touching other people's faces. But if you have to use hand sanitizer, it is, if we said good, better, best, best is hand washing. You know, hand sanitizer is better than nothing at all, right? Making your own, look, if you're desperate for something to use and you find a sort of a recipe that you feel comfortable with, I don't know that I have one for you, but you know, this is a scenario where you have to do what you feel comfortable with in your own home.
What about using a disinfectant hand soap that has is it triclocene or triclosan?
Triclosan, so antibacterial soap is what you're talking about.
Right.
So one of the things, first off, the difference between hand washing and hand sanitizer, hand washing is a mechanical process. What we're doing is we're taking our hands with bubbles and we're doing this, right? So those bubbles are literally pulling things off the surface of our hand and washing them down the sink. That's the point of hand washing, the bubbles, not what the bubbles are made of. And the problem with antibacterial soap is that antibacterial soap, if you think about just the word antibacterial, it doesn't kill bacteria, it just slows the growth of bacteria. It slows how quickly they reproduce, but it doesn't say anything about viruses, and that's what we're talking about right now. And so that is a problem. The second part of that problem is that antibacterial soap, if it works, look, my hands are probably covered right now, almost completely covered with good bacteria, even though I've washed them 9 times today, covered with good bacteria. If I wash my hands with antibacterial soap and it works, it's going to work on my good bacteria. But now I've left myself open. I've basically put up the vacancy sign for bad things to come live on my hands. The part you were talking about with triclosan is a long-standing problem I have with antibacterial soap, is that triclosan, this is sort of a PSA for the future. Triclosan is the #1 ingredient used in antibacterial soap, and it accumulates in our bodies over time. It was banned by the FDA in 2016. It was banned in the state of Minnesota, but you still can find product that it's in. And triclosan causes double binding of estrogen in women. So we think young girls have used it their whole life could have some female reproductive problems and some cancers. But suffice it to say, I don't care if you're using Dawn dishwashing liquid, you're using the best shampoo you have in the house. I don't care, as long as you have bubbles and you get a good 20 to 30-second scrub. Because let's all be real, if you were going in for surgery and a doctor put hand sanitizer on his hands, you probably wouldn't be okay with that. You'd want him to really wash his hands. So.
Right, so we really need to see foaming bubbles,
you need to see
lots of friction.
Bubbles. It's why you're seeing
nail brush.
Nail brush if you got one, and throw that nail brush in the dishwasher overnight if it's in your own home. You want it to get good and clean and dry.
Okay, and we could, with our nail brush, actually soak it in Barbicide and then
You
dry
could
it,
put the
correct?
nail brush
Okay,
because it's all synthetic. I've had a
okay.
lot of people calling me about spraying Barbicide on their tables or on chairs if they're doing anything where someone's sitting up. And one thing I am telling people, first off, product is going to become very scarce very soon. So I want people to be vigilant about how they use it. Spraying it on a surface that is porous is really kind of a waste of your time. So most of those tables and chairs are covered with man-made synthetic things that look like leather or feel like
Mhm,
leather, but are really porous. And on top of it, every disinfectant you use would be so harsh on that on that material that
mhm.
it would dry it out, which is not good for the material itself. So I'm suggesting redoing how you do barriers. So if somebody is worried because there's that piece of, let's say you use paper on your table instead of a full cloth covering, lay some towels down, put towels on the back of a chair, put towels on the armrest that you can pick up and wash after a service. It's a way that you can protect your client if they feel concerned. It's a way that you can protect your chair and not waste your product that you need to use on your hard non-porous surfaces.
Well, and I know we use a lot of electrical devices and usually wipe those down and let it sit for the recommended time.
Uh-huh.
Is that still a good idea to use those wipes, or are
Okay.
we needing to cover everything?
No, here's the thing with this virus. We don't know enough about it to know that if, for example, it's something you're using on my face, but not touching, let's say, an opening, your mouth or your eyes or your nose, whether it could be transmitted that way, we just don't know enough about it. So my best advice would be if you have enough supply of disinfecting wipes, wipe everything down with the wipes when you're done with the service, and maybe do it again before you start the next service if you've got time to do that and you have enough product to do that. Remember, I know some people will get desperate and start using bleach. Remember, if you use bleach, bleach has to be mixed with water, and never mix bleach with hot water. Hot water causes bleach to separate and it will not disinfect. So you need bleach and cold water to disinfect if that's what you're attempting to do.
So that leads us to linens. If bleach needs cold water, but some states are requiring us to,
Yeah.
put our linens in a hot, what's the recommendation on
I,
that? Or do our dryers get hot enough?
I'm constantly saying to states, this is a dumb rule because now all you're doing is ruining their towels because you're
Right.
making them wash all their linens in hot water with bleach, and the bleach isn't doing its job because it's separating, right?
Mhm.
So I will say this, if you think you are in an at-risk area where there's an outbreak locally, let's say, if you were in the Seattle area, the New York City area, I might be inclined to wash all of my linens on cold with bleach and then run my dryer until everything is hot to the touch.
Mhm.
In other parts of the country where maybe we're not seeing as much of a localized outbreak, because I think what we'll start seeing is there's going to be pockets of it around the country.
Right.
In areas where you're not seeing as much of an outbreak, if you want to wash, just wash on hot if that makes you feel good with detergent. But the heat of the dryer is what kills things. Interestingly enough, enveloped viruses, that lipid cell membrane they have is really fairly easy to rupture, and the heat of that dryer will do a really good job, probably.
Okay.
Probably, I don't know for a fact.
I'm all for cold with your bleach at this point in time,
Yeah, yeah,
extraordinary things for extraordinary
yeah. And making
situations.
sure that they're buying bleach that disinfects. I think a lot of people are surprised that
Mm.
not all bleach is disinfecting bleach. In the Clorox family, for example, the only one that disinfects is what I call the pool boy chlorine bleach. It has a label that says disinfecting bleach on it. Lemon fresh,
Oh,
any scented bleach, any splashless bleach does not disinfect. Says it right on the label, but we don't read the label very often. So if
okay.
you're buying bleach to kill things, make sure you're getting disinfecting bleach. And the easiest way to know that is turn it over, and on the back, if there's instructions that say for disinfection and they tell you how to disinfect, then you've got disinfecting bleach. Otherwise, it will say for laundry and for deodorizing.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a great, I didn't even know that. That
yeah,
is fabulous because I don't read my bleach labels.
yeah.
But
Most
I
people
also don't use it in, treatment room other than to try to get my stuff whiter,
yeah.
essentially. Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about treatment room steps. I know Aesthetics Council, with your help, has put together a step-by-step guide for treatment rooms. We hit a lot of the information in general. I think one of the things that is kind of a problem for me is the use of gloves. Like at a certain point in my career, since I've been so exposed to so many chemicals for years, I just got to the point where I could not touch anybody without wearing gloves. And I feel like that really needs to be a standard. What are your recommendations for working with people? I mean, at this point in time, I feel like gloves touching everyone, even gloves to clean my surfaces, and then also a mask if you can find it. And I know those are very difficult to find.
Very difficult to find. Couple things on that. Gloves, I love gloves, but what I don't love is that people think gloves make them immune to everything. They put on their gloves and they think, I'm not going to get it. But if you touch a surface with your gloves and you touch your face, even with your gloves on, you're still putting yourself at risk. So being vigilant when you have gloves on, that you're putting on a new pair for one client and you're only going between that client, whatever surface you're working on, whether it's their face or whatever surface you're working on, and the already disinfected implements that you're going to use, that you just are very cautious about that. This might be a time where if you're using products that come in multi-use containers, that you scoop them out and put them in little plastic cups right there,
Mhm.
easy to do, so you're not going back to that container you've touched 1,000 times, you know, in the past week, kind of a thing. So I like gloves, but be aware when you're wearing them that it's not the protection you might think it is if you're going to not use them um, without touching your own face or your client's face after you've touched a multi-touch surface. As far as masks, if you can get them, masks were designed for the protection of somebody. For example, if someone was on the OR table and we have their abdomen open and the surgeon sneezes, we don't want to get all of that in somebody's abdomen, obviously. So they're made kind of what I would say is like a one-way street to some extent. It stops that stuff from coming through the mask, but it's not as effective of stopping things coming back in that you're breathing in, which is why the CDC and everybody else said, you know, don't use a mask if you're not sick. I also, and if I'm being honest, think they said it because they didn't want people to hoard masks so that healthcare workers did not have them. So in your profession, where somebody is literally oftentimes right here in my airspace, right below me where I'm breathing, I think a mask is very appropriate if you can find it. If I were getting a service today and I came in and you were not wearing a mask, I might reconsider. So
So what are some options? I know I've found food service and industrial, like my husband works in construction and they have full face masks that they can use that are plexiglass. Um, I know you can still get those industrially. Do those work as well as kind of that sneeze shield, or is it just
well,
kind of not
look,
as
you're going to be getting what you can get, right? You're going to
right?
be using whatever it is that you can find, because you want to make your clients feel comfortable that they're not going to go home with something that they didn't come in with, um, especially with it being now what we know about respiratory droplet. So anything that will divert not only your breathing, but also if you were to sneeze, that kind of thing, anything that will divert that away from falling right down on the client. And let's be realistic, even if you have seasonal allergies and you know they're seasonal allergies, don't come to work until you can get them under control. Don't be sneezing and coughing. It's just very unsettling to people right now, and likely they'll blame you if they get sick, even if it wasn't you.
Mm-hmm.
So now is a time to take a day or two off, um, you know, even if it's just seasonal allergies. Which, by the way, life goes on. People still do get regular colds. People do get seasonal allergies. People are still getting the seasonal flu. So, which is another point I just do want to really quickly. People keep on Facebook and places saying that this is just like the seasonal flu, and it isn't, for one big reason, and that is when you get the flu, if you've ever had it, you know that you get so sick so fast. The only place you're going to go is to bed.
Yep.
In this scenario, that's the problem with this virus, is that people don't get that sick. We've heard that up to 60 to 70% of people have no symptoms at all. And they're called
Wow.
silent spreaders. If you don't have any symptoms, you're walking around thinking, oh, I'm fine. I'm not going to get anybody else sick. But that's the problem, because you are still shedding the virus even before you get sick, or even if you never get symptoms in this case. In China, they think 62% of the cases were from what we would call silent spreaders, people that never had symptoms. So, being conscious of the fact that, we all have a role to play in making sure that this doesn't get any worse than it's already going to be. I mean, the wheels are already in motion. This train has
Right.
left the station, so.
Right. We're already looking at some states where salons and spas are completely closed per
Yeah.
governor orders. And I think that is based on what I saw today too. They're asking all non-essential appointments to be canceled. So this will definitely have an impact on us as estheticians and our livelihood. And we will definitely continue gathering information to help you make some smart decisions. I know, Leslie, you had some ideas on how to stagger appointments if you're still able to stay open
Yeah.
and help kind of explain that staggering of appointments or what you
Yeah.
were talking about.
A couple of things that I have suggested to all types of services, if you're trying to stay open. One is to just stagger your appointments, as you said. If you normally would do a 9 o'clock appointment and a 10 o'clock appointment, maybe do a 9 o'clock appointment and a 10:30 appointment. That 9 o'clock person is gone, and you have time to disinfect before the 10 o'clock person shows up. Yes, it's less customers, but I'm guessing you're all experiencing a drop anyway, so you probably have the time to do that. It means that no two clients are in your room at the same time. Well, they wouldn't be in your room at the same time, but in your business even at the same time. One's come and one's gone. You have time to properly disinfect. I also would suggest if you have clients that are in what they consider to be at risk, I think they're bringing that age down to 60 now, 60 and above, or somebody who's got some immunocompromised situation. If they still want a service, but they're very nervous about it, maybe you can come in an hour early before you even open, or you can stay an hour late so nobody's there but you and your client. I mean, that's entirely up to you, but it gives some options to your clients that at least mitigate the risk to some extent. Another thing that I've been giving, and another idea I've been giving people, is their point of sale payment. So if you have a iPad, for example, that you are using for people to put their credit card in and then sign sometimes with their finger or with a little stylus, for the time being, put that down where they can't reach it and ask them to read you their credit card number. You can now key it in yourself. It makes a bypass of the signature line because the computer terminal thinks you are taking an online or phone order.
Mm-hmm.
It will bypass the signature line. So now nobody touches your point of sale equipment except for you. And that means you're not wasting your resources of wipes, which if everyone's touching it, you should be doing after every single customer.
Right. Right. And for those of you that can do that, I know it's a higher percentage on the credit card fee, but for now it's worth paying a little bit extra. I would also say testers should be removed completely. I wouldn't even leave out my makeup testers anymore.
I totally agree with that. There is
Yeah.
no way to make those safe. There is absolutely no way. I have consulted with some of the attorneys for some of the companies, the retail sites that have testers out about what to do. And my recommendation to all of them has been to completely get rid of testers right now. There is literally no way to disinfect properly for those. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we have a full PDF that we'll make available on our Facebook site and through different state boards that you as an esthetician can download and use these steps as well. So we'll get that information for you. Moving on, we've talked a lot about decreasing risk with some of the things that you're mentioning, Leslie. What are some other tips that we can use to decrease our risk, even at home or interacting with our family members?
I do think that the social distancing is a great idea, but it shouldn't give us a false sense of security. I feel like if you can just stay in place, if you can just stay in your own home, if you can aggregate important trips. So for example, if you're going to the grocery store because you do need food, no one's gonna shun you for that, but perhaps call a neighbor that's elderly that shouldn't be at the grocery store. Call other family members and say, I'm going, I might as well shop for everybody and bring it back, and I'll separate it out and drop it off on your front porch, that type of thing. I think there are things about disinfecting, using chemicals or disinfectants, I should say, properly for the full contact time. Maybe if you aren't in the habit of doing that at home as much as you are at work, I'm guessing you're adherent to it at work, but maybe at home, you just wipe down the kitchen counter and walk away.
Mhm.
This would not be the time to do that. This is the time to even pay attention to the contact time on the disinfecting products you're using in your own home. If someone in your home does start to feel sick, normal things are happening. Like I said, seasonal flu is still happening, regular colds are still happening, but this is a time to say that person should probably stay in a room away from everybody else and use a bathroom if that's possible that other people are not using.
Mhm.
In my own home, for example, my 80-year-old mother lives with us, and nobody is using her bathroom. And we're making sure that we make very limited trips outside the house just because we don't want to bring something home to her.
Yeah, very good. And our pets are okay. There's
Well,
no.
I'm a big pet fan. I've been a
Me too.
dog come out on the top step there every once in a while.
Yep.
And I actually volunteer at a local animal shelter. We had a conference call today, and we did talk about that there does not appear to be any risk of pets spreading it or in any way being a risk to humans. In fact, they might be your biggest lifeline right now. They seem,
Very true.
and boy, are they excited that everybody's home. So,
They are.
yeah,
Yeah, that talk about stress reduction, which is going to be another topic that we're going to try to address here pretty soon. But yeah, I couldn't do it without my puppies. That's my
no,
immediate stress reducer. So,
no.
well, thank you so much for taking
Yeah,
the time. And we will definitely be checking back in with Leslie in a couple of weeks as things start to change and we get more and more information. Just to let you know, too, we're probably looking at a pretty painful couple week period. Some of you may have to shut down completely. In the meantime, what we are working on with the Aesthetics Council is an actual verification program on disinfection. And what this will do is it will create a badge that you can use digitally or even in print to communicate with your customer that you understand all of these principles of disinfection and you are working at the highest, cleanest level possible. And we will have links to the online training for Barbecide as well as the Aesthetics Council test. There is a test involved that you need to take. We'll get you as many resources as you can. You can take the test and then we'll issue that badge so that you can use it when you're ready to get back to work. Or if you're working right now, you can use it in your social media to let people know that you know what's going on. So thank you very much, Leslie, and we'll be in
welcome.
touch soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.